I was thinking about something when you were talking earlier about one of the tenets of the CCP's ideology is that they are in this struggle between Chinese communism and the West capitalism, and that there must be perpetual revolution, like all these things. And then from the U.S. side, let's say the U.S. State Department saying like, oh, well, we don't trying to say we don't want to contain China. Like we don't have a containment policy for China. We want China to be part of the, international order, to be like a responsible party in the international order. Essentially we want to engage this kind of stuff. But then does that, it doesn't seem like that is compatible with the CCP's ideological framework of how they understand the world.
Yeah, the John Garneau, the Australian sinologist, put it very aptly that the Chinese approach to dealing with the United States is "we live, you die." It's basically they have a Chinese phrase for it. Whereas publicly they're talking about win-win, which wags have said, "Oh yeah, the Chinese win twice." Even the Biden administration just recently, in the phone call between President Biden and Xi Jinping, we learned this from Chinese state media, not from the White House readout, but Mr. Biden again repeated, which other senior officials have too, that the United States does not oppose Chinese communist system. They basically accept it, and they want to try to compete with it, but they're not competing with it. So they don't fully understand the power of the communist ideology in China and it's their ability to influence and act in ways that are against what's happening in the country. And they don't understand it. They said they don't want a Cold War, but at the same time, the military has told us that China is engaged in what they call gray zone warfare, which is basically warfare below the kinetic level. And we see that against allies like in the South China Sea most recently. We see it against Taiwan, where they're using massive military coercion on a daily basis. We see it towards Japan. And the U.S. strategy has been to try and get allies together. But unless there's a stronger ideological component, if we recognize that this regime in Beijing does not want to compete with us. This is not the Indy 500 where you're going to have a race and the winner will race. They're working to achieve global dominance at the expense of the United States, and that's not fully recognized yet. I mean, it needs to be recognized. So we need to go from strategic competitor to understand that the Chinese Communist Party is an adversary of the United States. During the Trump administration, I had a friend in the State Department, Miles Yu, who's one of the best China experts, and he was one of the top policymakers. And I said, what the State Department should do is to do a white paper on the crimes of the Chinese Communist Party to educate people. And of course, it was resisted and opposed by the bureaucracy, which said that they couldn't do that. They couldn't do it, right? And so that effort was subverted. But that's kind of what's needed. We need to have a full record, and something like that could be the basis for changing the policy and making a policy that would really be effective. But as long as the U.S. is going to try and coexist with the Chinese Communist Party, we're going to be at a major strategic disadvantage.
Yeah, what occurs to me with that whole line of, we don't want to, we just want to compete. We are not a threat to the CCP. We're not trying to contain you or your system, is that the CCP doesn't believe it at all. But then internally, the U.S. starts to believe it. You know what I mean? If the State Department says this over and over again, then what do the people who are, in the think tanks, coming up with policy within the administrations, they're like, okay, well, we don't want to challenge the CCP, essentially. That's our stated goal, right? So instead, in a way, we are making ourselves weaker and not convincing the CCP of anything.
Yeah, and there's even a kind of self-delusion about this notion of containment, which this is the uh, one of the key Chinese Communist Party tenets is that the U.S. is engaged in an insidious effort to create the peaceful evolution out of communism, which is basically anti-communism. But at the same time, we're aggressively pursuing our allies who are very fearful of the expanding power of communist China. And we're doing many, many things defensively and in ways that clearly are an effort to contain this China. Containment has the tinge of the Soviet Union, which was much more expansionist. In the Chinese Communist Party's view, they're using their economic power now. And we see a number of initiatives which are all designed to fit the China Dream scenario or Xi Jinping's global hegemony scenario. They have the Belt and Road Initiative, again, which is couched as a infrastructure development plan in the developing world. They have the Global Security Initiative, which again is to try to set up police stations, Chinese police stations and others, and do security cooperation. So they have a number of these initiatives, all of which are ideologically driven, and yet we haven't really been honest with the people of the United States or the people of the world that these are, again, nefarious programs designed to weaken and undermine the free and democratic system that the U.S. is currently leading.